The night was cold, and the ruins of the battlefield were silent. Ash drifted in the wind, and broken machines stood like graves in the empty land. The war between humans and aliens had ended weeks ago, but the land still carried the scars of fire and blood. Among the wreckage, a human named Daniel walked carefully, his boots crunching on the black soil. He was searching for food, water, and anything useful to carry back to his small camp. He had learned that survivors had to look for treasure in ruins, even if those ruins were once places of death. Daniel carried a flashlight, its beam cutting through the smoke that still rose from broken metal. The air smelled of iron and old flames. He thought the land was empty, only shadows and silence, until he heard something soft. It was not the cry of a bird or the rustle of leaves. It was weaker, like a whisper lost in the wind. He stopped, listening. The sound came again, a faint breath, a small gasp. Daniel moved closer, past shattered walls and twisted steel, and then he saw her. She was lying on the ground, half covered in dust and ash. Her skin was pale blue, marked with strange lines of silver across her arms and face. Her hair was tangled, her clothes torn. Her body shook with every weak breath, as if life was leaving her with each second. Daniel froze, his hand tightening on his weapon. She was alien, one of them, the very enemy that had fought against his people. For a moment, he thought about turning away. He had seen what aliens did to humans, and many of his friends had died fighting them. But as he looked at her, he saw no enemy. He saw a girl, broken and abandoned, left to die without care. He knelt beside her, his heart heavy with conflict. Her eyes opened slowly, glowing faintly in the dark. She looked at him with fear, but there was no strength in her body to move. Her lips moved, but no words came out, only a dry breath that sounded like a plea. Daniel reached into his pack and pulled out a small bottle of water. He hesitated, then lifted her head gently and pressed the bottle to her lips. At first she did not drink, too weak, but when the first drop touched her mouth, her body tried to swallow. She drank slowly, trembling, her eyes never leaving his face. There was mistrust, fear, and something else, a spark of hope. As she drank, Daniel thought about his people. If they saw him helping an alien, they would call him a traitor. They would say she deserved to die, abandoned by her own kind. But Daniel was not able to watch someone die when he could save them. Humanity, he believed, was not about cruelty, but about compassion. And maybe, in this broken world, compassion was the only thing that still made them human. When she finished drinking, her hand rose slowly, trembling. She tried to push the bottle back, as if thanking him. Her voice was soft, almost broken, but he heard a single word. Why? Daniel had no answer. He did not know why he helped her, only that he could not leave her. He looked at her wounds, deep cuts across her side, marks that were not from battle, but from abandonment. Her own people had left her behind, not because of the enemy, but because they chose her life was not worth saving. It made Daniel's chest tighten with anger. Even enemies should not betray their own like this. He took a deep breath and lifted her into his arms. She was light, far too light, as if hunger had eaten her strength away. She rested weakly against him, her breath shallow, her heart barely beating. Daniel looked at the ruined horizon. His camp was far, and the path dangerous, but he had made his choice. He would carry her, protect her, and give her a chance to live. As he walked back into the dark, he felt the weight of more than just her body. He carried a secret that could bring anger from both humans and aliens. But in that moment, all that mattered was the fragile life in his arms. A life abandoned by her own kind. A life he refused to let die. The night grew darker as Daniel carried the alien girl through the ruins. The broken buildings rose around him like silent watchers, and every step echoed in the emptiness. The girl in his arms was light, almost weightless, but her presence felt heavier than stone. He knew that taking her was dangerous, yet something inside refused to let him turn away. When Daniel reached his camp, He placed her gently on a blanket near the small fire he had kept alive. The fire gave warmth, though weak, and its glow touched her pale blue skin. Her silver markings shimmered faintly, like fading stars. For the first time, Daniel looked at her not as an alien, but as someone lost, someone fragile. He pulled food from his pack, a piece of dry bread and a small container of soup he had saved. At first, she turned her face away, her eyes filled with suspicion. Her kind had always taught her that humans were cruel, that humans would rather see her suffer than live. But Daniel was patient. He broke the bread into smaller pieces and placed them near her hand. Slowly, her trembling fingers reached out, touched the food, and then pulled back as if afraid it was a trick. "Eat," Daniel whispered, his voice steady, though he knew she might not understand. Yet she seemed to know the meaning. Her hunger betrayed her fear, and finally, she picked up the bread and ate. Each bite was small, shaky, but real. Her eyes lifted to his again, filled with confusion. Why was he helping her? Daniel watched her, and in her face he saw more than an alien. He saw a child of war, broken by her own people's cruelty. Her scars told stories, not of victory, but of betrayal. He wanted to ask her questions, but he knew trust was not built in a single night. So he gave her silence, letting her eat, letting her breathe. As the fire crackled, the girl spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft, broken like glass. "They left me," she whispered, the words slow and heavy. Daniel frowned, leaning closer. Her eyes glistened, though no tears fell. "My people left me to die." The words struck him like a blade. She was not his enemy. Her true enemies were her own kind, the ones who had abandoned her. Daniel's hand tightened into a fist, anger burning inside him. He thought of all the speeches her people had given during the war about honor and strength. But leaving their weak to die was no honor. It was cruelty wearing the mask of power. The girl tried to sit up, but fell back with a wince. Daniel caught her gently, holding her shoulders until she settled again. Her gaze stayed on him, questioning, studying. "You are human," she said slowly, her voice almost unsure. "Yes," Daniel answered quietly. She blinked, her eyes shining faintly in the firelight. "Why help me?" Daniel hesitated, the question cutting deep. Why was he helping her? Because he could not watch another life fade away. Because even in war, there were lines he refused to cross. Because humanity, to him, meant something more than survival. It meant compassion. But all he said was, "Because you deserve to live." Her lips parted, but no words came. For a long moment, they sat in silence, broken only by the fire's crackle. Daniel gave her another sip of water and covered her with an old blanket. She closed her eyes, her breathing soft and uneven. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, her body relaxed as if, for the first time, she felt safe. Daniel sat awake, his weapon resting across his knees. He knew danger was not far. If his people found him, they would call him a traitor. If her people found her, they would finish what they had started. Either way, he was now protecting someone the world wanted dead. As the night stretched on, Daniel thought about the road ahead. He could not keep her here forever. She needed more care, more food, more strength than he alone could give. But he also knew he had made a promise, not with words, but with actions. He had chosen to carry her, and now her survival was tied to his own. The fire burned low, and the wind howled outside the camp. Daniel looked at the sleeping alien girl and whispered to himself, "They may have abandoned you, but I will not." The morning came slowly, the pale light of dawn crawling across the ruined land. Daniel was already awake, his eyes sharp and his weapon ready. The alien girl still lay on the blanket, her chest rising and falling in weak rhythm. For a moment, Daniel thought she might not wake, but then her eyes opened, glowing faintly in the dim light. She tried to sit up, her hands trembling, and Daniel helped her carefully. Her gaze moved to the fire, then to him, as if searching for something in his face. There was still fear in her eyes, but now there was also a trace of trust, fragile like glass. She held the blanket tightly around her shoulders, her voice quiet. "I am alive." Daniel nodded, offering her another sip of water. "You are," he said softly. But as she moved, Daniel noticed marks across her side. Deep scars, strange burns, wounds that did not come from battle. They looked deliberate, like someone had carved them into her flesh. He frowned, his chest tightening with anger. "These," he whispered, pointing gently toward the marks. "Who did this?" She flinched at his words, pulling the blanket closer. For a long moment, she said nothing, her lips pressed together as if afraid. Finally, she whispered, "My own kind." The words echoed heavy in the cold air. Daniel stared at her, shocked. Her people had not only abandoned her, they had hurt her, punished her, marked her as worthless. Her eyes flickered with shame as she continued. "They call it cleansing. The weak are left behind. The wounded are marked. They say only the strong deserve to live." Daniel's hands clenched into fists, his jaw tight. He thought of his own soldiers, men and women who never left their wounded behind. He remembered carrying friends through fire, remembered the oaths they swore. To him, strength was not in abandoning others. It was in protecting them. The cruelty of her people filled him with silent rage. The girl lowered her gaze, her voice breaking. "I tried to fight. I wanted to prove I was strong. But they said I was broken. They said I was not worthy." Daniel's heart ached at her words. He saw not an enemy, but a child of war, crushed by her own people's rules. Slowly, he reached out, placing his hand gently over hers. "You are not broken," he said firmly. "They are wrong." She looked at him, her eyes wide, as if no one had ever spoken such words to her before. The fire crackled, and for a moment, silence wrapped around them. A fragile bond was forming, something deeper than survival. It was trust, built on kindness in the middle of cruelty. But the peace did not last. In the distance, Daniel heard a faint hum, carried by the wind. His body stiffened. He knew that sound. Engines, moving fast, searching. He stood quickly, grabbing his weapon, his eyes scanning the horizon. The girl's eyes widened in fear. "They come," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel's heart pounded. Her people had discovered she still lived, and they would not allow her survival. They would finish what they had started. The girl clutched the blanket tighter, her body shaking. "They will kill me," she said, her voice almost breaking. "They cannot let me return. I carry secrets they fear." Daniel looked at her, his mind racing. She was more than just a survivor. She carried knowledge her people wanted buried. Perhaps something about their weakness, something about their counsel. Whatever it was, it made her dangerous to them. And now, by saving her, Daniel had tied himself to her fate. He crouched beside her, his voice steady but urgent. "Listen to me. If they find us, they will kill us both, but we can move, we can hide. I will protect you." Her eyes filled with tears she could not shed, and for the first time, she nodded without resistance. She trusted him, even if only a little. Daniel lifted her into his arms once more, her weight light, but her presence heavy with meaning. As he moved through the ruins, the sound of engines grew louder. Shadows of alien hunters swept across the ground, searching, relentless. Daniel's breath came hard, but his grip did not loosen. He knew he was running not only from enemies, but towards something greater. This girl, abandoned and marked, was no ordinary survivor. She was the key to a truth hidden in blood and betrayal. The chase had only begun, and Daniel understood that saving her was not just about compassion anymore. It was about defiance. Defiance against cruelty, against abandonment, against the idea that only the strong deserve to live. The girl clung to him weakly, her eyes closing as exhaustion pulled at her. But before sleep claimed her, she whispered a single word that burned into his heart. "Family." Daniel held her tighter, his jaw set. She had been abandoned by her own kind, but now she was his responsibility, and he would not let her fall again. The ruins echoed with the distant growl of engines. Daniel moved quickly through broken streets, his steps steady but urgent. The alien girl lay in his arms, her body weak, her breath shallow, yet her eyes opened at every sound. Fear lived in those eyes, a fear not of him, but of the ones hunting her. The air was cold, carrying dust and smoke from fires long dead. Shadows stretched across the land as the sun began to sink. Daniel kept low, weaving between collapsed walls and burned vehicles. His mind worked fast, measuring every turn, every chance to hide. The sound grew louder, sharper. He recognized the hum of alien skimmers, machines built for speed. They moved in patterns, hunting, sweeping the ruins like wolves chasing prey. Daniel pressed against a crumbling wall, his breath steady but heavy. He adjusted the girl in his arms, whispering softly, "Stay quiet, stay with me." She clutched the blanket close, her silver-lined skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Her whisper trembled, "They will not stop. They want me gone. They want me erased." Daniel's jaw tightened, anger sparking his chest. "They will have to go through me first," he answered, his voice low and sharp. They moved again, slipping through alleys filled with twisted metal. Every step was dangerous, every sound a risk. Daniel knew his own people would call him a fool for carrying her. But he had already made his choice. She was no longer just an alien, no longer just a stranger. She was someone who trusted him, even when she had no reason to. Suddenly, a beam of light swept across the rubble. Daniel ducked behind an overturned vehicle, holding her close. The skimmer hovered nearby, its engines whining like an angry beast. He could see the hunters inside, tall figures with glowing eyes scanning the shadows. Their voices echoed through the machine speakers, harsh and cold. "Find her. She cannot be allowed to live." The girl's body trembled, her fingers clutching Daniel's sleeve. He placed a hand gently over hers, steadying her. "We keep moving," he whispered. When the light passed, he slipped out of hiding and pressed forward, his eyes sharp. He had survived war, and now he would survive this chase. The ruins opened into what had once been a marketplace. Stalls lay broken, stones scattered, the silence thick with memories of life before war. Daniel set the girl down for a moment, crouching beside her. "We need to keep going, but you must try to walk," he said gently. She shook her head weakly. "I have no strength." Daniel thought quickly, scanning the broken stalls. He spotted a small cart, wheels bent but usable. With effort, he pushed it free and lined it with cloth. Carefully, he placed her inside, covering her with a blanket. It was not perfect, but it gave his arms rest and kept her hidden. The engines roared closer, the voices sharper. Daniel gripped the handle of the cart and began to push. His muscles strained, the wheels squealing against stone, but he kept moving, one step after another. Every second was borrowed time. The girl peeked from under the blanket, her voice soft. "They fear me because of what I know." Daniel's eyes flicked to her. "What do you know?" She hesitated, her voice almost breaking. "The council, secrets of power, secrets they hide from even our own. They think knowledge makes me dangerous." Her words sank deep into Daniel's mind. This was not only about survival. This was about truth, and truth could shake worlds. Before he could ask more, the ground shook. A skimmer landed nearby, its metal legs striking the earth. Alien hunters stepped out, their armor glowing faintly, weapons in their hands. Daniel pulled the cart behind a wall, his heart pounding. The hunters spread out, their voices sharp. "She is near. Find her. Kill the human if you must." The girl's breath came fast, panic filling her eyes. Daniel crouched beside her, meeting her gaze. "You are not alone anymore. I will not let them take you," he said firmly. She looked at him, and for the first time, she believed him fully. Her fear was still there, but now it was joined by something else, hope. The hunters moved closer, their footsteps heavy. Daniel gripped his weapon, his mind racing. He was one man against many, but he had fought worse battles before. And this time, he was not only fighting for himself, he was fighting for her. The chase was no longer about survival alone. It was about defiance, about standing between cruelty and the fragile spark of life he carried with him. As the shadows closed in, Daniel's jaw tightened. He whispered one last promise. They will not have you, not while I breathe. The ruins grew quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that meant danger was near. Daniel pushed the cart slowly, every muscle tight, every sense alert. The alien girl lay hidden beneath the blanket, her breathing shallow, her silver-marked skin glowing faintly in the dim light. She kept her eyes on him, trusting him even as fear filled her heart. The hunters were close now, their shadows moving across broken walls. Daniel could hear their voices carried on the wind, sharp and cruel. Find them. The traitor human and the marked one must not escape. His grip tightened on his weapon, his jaw set. He had fought many battles, but this one was different. This time, he was not fighting for a flag or an army. He was fighting for one fragile life that depended on him. He pushed the cart behind a collapsed wall and crouched low. The skimmer engines roared above, sweeping the ruins with beams of light. Dust swirled, the air thick with tension. The girl whispered from under the blanket, "They are many. You cannot fight them all." Daniel's eyes stayed on the shadows. "I don't need to fight them all, just enough to keep you safe." He scanned the ground, his soldier's mind working fast. The ruins were dangerous, but danger could also be a weapon. He spotted a half-buried fuel cell among the rubble, cracked but still holding power. If he could use it right, it would explode with enough force to scatter the hunters. Carefully, he lifted it, his hands steady. The girl watched him, confusion in her tired eyes. "What are you doing?" "Turning their strength against them," he answered. He placed the fuel cell near a broken wall, then set a wire from his pack. It was a trap, simple but deadly. He pulled the cart further back, keeping her hidden. Moments later, the hunters entered the area, their weapons glowing, their eyes searching. One of them stepped near the fuel cell, and Daniel pressed the trigger. The explosion ripped through the ruins, fire and stone flying in all directions. The hunters were thrown back, their voices rising in shock and rage. Daniel grabbed the cart and pushed hard, racing through the chaos. The girl clung to the sides, her heart pounding. "You are insane," she whispered, half in fear, half in awe. Daniel's lips curved in a grim smile. "Maybe, but it works." The hunters regrouped quickly, their machines rising again. Beams of light swept the ruins, weapons firing at shadows. Daniel darted into a narrow alley, the walls close and sharp. The skimmers could not follow here, but the hunters on foot would. He set another trap, pulling a grenade from his pack and rolling it into the open. The blast echoed through the alley, dust and fire chasing away their pursuers. The girl stared at him, her voice trembling. "You fight like no one I have seen." Daniel shrugged, his eyes cold but calm. "Humans don't always win with strength. Sometimes we win with cleverness." They pressed deeper into the ruins, every corner filled with danger. The hunters were relentless, their voices carrying. "She must not survive. Kill the human if you must." The girl shivered, pulling the blanket tighter. Daniel looked at her, his voice steady. "Let them come. They will find I don't break so easily." Another squad closed in, weapons ready. Daniel pulled her into a shattered building, pushing the cart against the wall. He crouched low, his weapon steady, his breath calm. The hunters entered, their footsteps heavy. Daniel waited, counting the rhythm, then moved like a shadow. His rifle barked, one hunter fell, then another. The girl covered her ears, her eyes wide. She had seen humans fight before, but never like this. Daniel was one man, yet he moved with the fury of many. The hunters roared, firing back. Stone shattered, sparks lit the air. Daniel ducked, rolled, fired again. The battle was brutal, close, but he refused to fall. Finally, silence returned, broken only by the crackle of fire and the girl's uneven breath. Daniel lowered his weapon, sweat on his brow. He turned to her, his voice firm but gentle. "We keep moving, they will send more." She looked at him, her voice soft but certain. You should have left me. You risked your life for nothing. Daniel shook his head, his eyes hard. No life is nothing. Not yours, not anyone's. Her gaze lingered on him, her lips trembling as if she wanted to speak, but could not. For the first time, she felt something she had never known among her own people. Worth. Daniel pushed the cart again, his body weary, but unbroken. The ruins stretched ahead, filled with shadows and danger. But his resolve was stronger than fear. He would fight, he would protect, he would survive. The girl whispered one last word, almost too soft to hear. Hope. Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes on the horizon. That word was enough to carry him forward. Enough to make him fight again when the hunters came, because hope was something worth protecting. The ruins burned with smoke and fire from the battle. Daniel pushed forward, his body heavy with exhaustion, his rifle low but ready. The alien girl lay hidden in the cart, her silver lines glowing faintly as if her body itself held light. Every step he took was a struggle, but his resolve burned stronger than fear. Behind them, the hunters regrouped, their voices sharp in the distance. They cannot escape. The marked one must die. The human with her will fall too. Their machines roared, their weapons humming with deadly energy. Daniel knew he could not keep running forever. His strength had limits, his traps were running out, and the hunters were too many. He pulled the cart into a broken temple. The stone walls cracked, but tall enough to shield them for a while. The girl's eyes opened, wide and filled with fear. They will come. They will not stop. You cannot fight them all. Daniel crouched beside her, sweat dripping from his brow, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. I don't care how many there are. I will fight until I can't stand. She reached for his hand, her fingers cold, trembling. Why? She whispered, her voice breaking. Because you deserve more than to be thrown away, Daniel answered, his eyes steady. Because no one deserves to die abandoned. Tears welled in her glowing eyes, but she shook her head. You don't understand. They don't just want me gone. They fear me. Her voice dropped, almost to a whisper. They fear what I carry inside. Daniel frowned, confusion flashing across his face. What do you mean? Her breathing quickened, her hands clutched at her chest. There is power in me, power from the council, knowledge they put inside before they tried to erase me. I was not supposed to survive. She looked down, her voice trembling. They mark me not just as weak, but as dangerous, too dangerous for them to control. The air outside shook with the roar of skimmers, the temple walls trembling under the force of engines. The hunters were here, their footsteps heavy, their weapons charged. Daniel tightened his grip on his rifle, ready to stand against them. But the girl touched his arm, her voice sharp, desperate. No, not this time, let me fight. He stared at her, stunned. You can barely stand, he said, his voice hard. Her eyes burned with a strange light, silver lines across her skin glowing brighter. You don't understand. It's not strength of body. It's what's inside me. The hunters stormed the temple, their voices echoing. In them both, no mercy. Daniel raised his weapon, ready for the final stand. But the girl rose slowly from the cart, her blanket falling away. Her body trembled, but her eyes glowed like fire. The hunters froze for a moment, their weapons aimed, but their steps uncertain. Her voice rose, strong despite her weakness. You abandoned me. You tried to erase me, but I will not disappear. Light erupted from her skin, silver turning to white fire. The ground shook as a pulse of energy burst outward. Stone cracked, weapons shattered, hunters staggered back in shock. Daniel shielded his eyes, his body pressed against the wall. When the light dimmed, the hunters were on the ground, stunned, their weapons useless. The girl fell to her knees, her body weak from the effort. Daniel rushed to her side, catching her before she collapsed. Her breathing was shallow, her voice barely a whisper. This is why they fear me. This is why they cannot let me live. Daniel held her close, his heart pounding. They should fear you, but not because you are dangerous, he said firmly. They should fear you because you survived, because you refused to die. She looked up at him, her eyes soft, filled with something deeper than fear. "You are not like them," she whispered. "You see me, not as a weapon, not as broken, but as alive." Outside, the hunters stirred, groaning, but none dared move closer. They had seen her power, and they knew now that she was more than a victim. Daniel stood, lifting her into his arms again. "We need to move before they recover." She rested against him, too weak to walk, but her lips formed a single word. Together, Daniel stepped out of the ruined temple, the smoke clearing around them. For the first time since the chase began, he felt a shift. They were no longer only running, no longer only hiding. Now, they carried a secret that could shake empires. And in that secret was hope. The night settled over the ruins like a heavy blanket. The fires from the battle burned low, casting faint glows across broken stone and twisted metal. Daniel carried the alien girl away from the shattered temple, his steps slow but steady. She rested against him, her body weak after releasing her hidden power, her silver lines now dim. But her eyes were open, soft, watching him with something she had never felt before: trust. Behind them, the hunters did not follow. They had seen the light she carried inside, and fear had broken their will. For the first time, the enemy turned back, leaving them alone in the silence of the ruins. Daniel knew this peace would not last. Her people would send more, stronger ones, and the danger was not over. But for now, they had a moment of breathing. He set her down on a stone ledge, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. The air was cold, but the fire in her eyes kept the night from feeling empty. "You should sleep," Daniel said quietly, his voice tired but calm. She shook her head slowly. "No, if I sleep, I may not wake, not this time." He crouched in front of her, his gaze firm. "You will wake, because I will not let you go." Her lips trembled at his words, and she lowered her eyes. "No one has ever said that to me. Not my kind. Not anyone." Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and strong. "They abandoned you, but that is their weakness, not yours," he said. "You survived, and you found someone who will stand with you, no matter what comes." She lifted her gaze to him, and for the first time, a faint smile touched her face, fragile but real. "You are strange, human," she whispered. "You see value in what others throw away." Daniel gave a short laugh, tired but warm. "Maybe that's what makes us human. We don't measure worth in strength alone, but in the will to keep going." Silence wrapped around them, but it was no longer heavy. It was gentle, like a pause before a new journey. The girl pulled the blanket tighter and leaned closer. Her voice soft, almost a vow. "Then I am yours to protect, and I will not fear anymore." Daniel's chest tightened at her words. He had never thought of himself as a savior, never thought of himself as anything more than a survivor. But in this moment, carrying her, protecting her, he felt something he hadn't felt since before the war. Purpose. Not the kind given by generals or flags, but one born of choice, born of compassion. The stars above broke through the smoke, faint but shining. The girl tilted her head back, her eyes wide as she looked at them. "They are beautiful," she whispered. "I thought I would never see them again." Daniel followed her gaze, the stars reflecting in his tired eyes. "Now you will see many more," he said, his voice steady, "because you're not alone anymore." She closed her eyes, leaning against him, her breathing soft, not broken, not abandoned, but safe, even if only for now. Daniel held her close, his heart heavy with the weight of the future. He knew the road ahead was filled with danger, but he also knew something had changed. She was no longer a stranger, no longer only a burden. She was family, and family was worth any fight. As the night stretched on, Daniel kept watch, his weapon at his side. The alien girl slept peacefully for the first time since she had been left to die. Her people had abandoned her, but humanity had given her something new, not just survival, but a second chance. Daniel whispered into the quiet night, his voice firm as a vow. "They may come again, they may try to take you, but they will learn one thing." He looked down at her sleeping form, his jaw tight, his eyes bright with determination. "You are not alone, not anymore." The wind carried his words into the ruins, into the stars above. And though the future held battles, pain, and struggle, there was also hope. Because one human had refused to let her die, and that single choice had changed everything.